I'm going to learn everything there is to learn. And mainly my focus was on Chuck. What he said, how he said it, what he did, what he didn't do, because he was a guy I wanted to be like. And he was very smart. He was a very smart guy, and strong and athletic, and had amazing communication skills and people skills. And I was learning those things too. I've never learned them as well as he did, it seems like, but he was really good at that. And there was a conversation go back and forth between the two. Nothing concerned me. The control tower said, "You're cleared for takeoff. Turn right, heading 240, climb maintain 3000, the typical clearance. Departure control 124.65, whatever. All the normal radio communication. Chuck repeated the clearance. We got onto the runway. We started accelerating. Then, you know, the throttles go forward, 2 engines, 2 throttles. And we're now starting to rock and roll, so to speak, rolling down the runway. We get to a reasonably high speed. I'm guessing 80 knots, okay? And we start to rotate. In other words, rotation is when the pilots pull back on the flight controls and the nose of the airplane goes up. The main gear is still on the runway, but the nose of the aircraft starts to go in the pitch up. So we were doing that at about 80 knots, which is earlier than normal. We started climbing, got off the ground. I could hear the landing gear struts extend. I knew we were off the ground. We started climbing. It didn't seem right. It didn't feel right. It didn't sound right. Something was wrong, it seemed. But then the landing gears brought up, and I'm looking at the airspeed indicator, looking at the altimeter. Now, I can't remember a lot of details because of the accident and the memory problems, but I can remember that something was wrong. And then within about 5 seconds later, I knew something was horribly wrong. I could hear the engines going, and I can hear them today. I can hear the engines out of sync going, you know, just this loud, horrible sound that the engines normally are, they just hum and they're in sync and they just blend together. 2 powerful engines with their propellers spinning. But this was just the opposite. And it was a horrible sound. And Chuck then, before I could even think, Chuck pointed with his left hand and he said, "Let's land in that clear area over there." What the? I never expected to hear him say that ever. You never train for hearing words like that. Pilots are interesting. When they panic, you almost can't tell it. They're just stoic. Most of them, professional pilots, they'll go to their death pretty stoic. They don't scream or holler or yell like a lot of folks might do. They're just doing their job right to the very end. And that was Chuck. "Let's land in that clear area over there." I lifted up from my seat to look over the nose of the aircraft, and I saw what looked like, it kind of looked like a golf course or a park or something. Lots of green grass and some trees. And strangely, I noticed those trees are higher than we are. And about that time, I saw Chuck grab the flight controls away from Gene. Gene was still flying. But now Chuck took authority and grabbed the flight controls and turned them all the way left, all the way back against his chest in a motion that took about 1/10 of a second, just. And interestingly enough, that was the last thing I remember. I could see the trees, you know, in the windshield. Now, the accident, if it was to be recreated, our left wingtip clipped the top of some very tall trees. The trees were over 100 feet tall, and we clipped them, just clip 3 of them at the 80-foot level. And I found this all out later. but I didn't know it for a long time. We clipped those trees with our left wingtip, and with our mass and our velocity, it turned the airplane going now in a different direction. And in that other direction was this 7-story tall building that, it's strange, but I don't remember seeing it at the time. But we crashed into a building, but my memory's gone from that point. My human memory, okay, I have to make this clear. My human memory goes blank right at the point of just before impact. But then I have other memories that are very different. When we crashed into the monument, I don't remember that. When we hit the ground, I don't remember that. And that was a 7-story fall to the ground. All 3 of us pilots landed boom, boom, boom together. The airplane was actually broken into so many pieces by the velocity and the shape and the durability of the structure that we hit, that it broke the airplane up into little pieces. And so there was no cockpit to be in anymore. So all of our seats were, we were still strapped into them, and then we hit the ground. But see, this is what's strange. My earthly memory doesn't remember. But then something very weird happened that I had never been prepared for. I'd never read about, I'd never heard about. And, but a very, very real experience happened. And that is, the next thing I remember is looking down at 3 pilots, not knowing who they are. And I'm looking at the first one going, oh, he's dead. And I could tell you why, but it was obvious. He was grossly dead. And the next pilot looked familiar, and he looks dead. And the next pilot, oh, he must be dead too. And then I recognize that's me. And I'm looking down at the 3rd pilot, who was right here on the ground, smashed up against some the instrument panel. And there was no movement, and there didn't seem to be, I found this out later, there didn't seem to be any blood flow. So there was 3 engineers that came from Lockheed nearby. They came running over. And according to their report, and I actually could see them, they looked at all 3 pilots and thought all 3 of us were dead, because there was no motion, no blood flow, and then there was fuel everywhere. And one of them yelled out, "Get back, there's going to be a fire." Rightfully so, because there was plenty of fuel that we had taken off with full fuel. We had impacted, and the fuel just went everywhere. And we found out later that both engines were running at full power. There was no engine failure. So the engines were running, and they were hot as can be. So I still don't understand why there wasn't an explosion. Years later, I became an accident prevention counselor. I did a lot of accident investigations, and there's almost always a fire. And in that environment, there would be a fire, always. I can't explain it. The Burbank Fire Department takes credit for getting there early and putting out the fire. But the problem is, there's 10 minutes of 2 hot engines sitting on the ground, doused in fuel, and there's no fire. So it's a little miraculous.